What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
Aloha America, welcome to our show today, and it is Wednesday, December 6, 2017, middle of the weekday, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday. And boy, I got to tell you, what a horrible news day it is. We'll get into that in just a little tiny bit. But the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials and keeping us out of trouble. And as a reminder, in our third hour today, we're going to have two guests, Dave Gahary and Phil Turney, to talk about their new book, Erasing the Liberty, which is basically a look back at the years and years of attempted cover-up regarding Israel's deliberate attack on the USS Liberty and effort to sink the ship in order to trick the United States into war against Egypt. So we're going to be talking about that in our third hour. And it's rather ironic timing when you realize that Israel is in the news, because earlier today, Donald Trump went ahead and did it. He threw a lit match into a tanker of gasoline by declaring that the United States will recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital, and they will move the U.S. embassy there. This has drawn immediate condemnation from around the world, from everybody except, of course, Israel. And, of course, Trump supporters in this country, the Jewish Americans and the Christian Zionists, they all think it's a good thing, especially the Christian Zionists, because it's one step closer to the war of Armageddon, and the world will be destroyed, and then Jesus is going to come on down and invite us all up to the big house. So this is a good thing. It's a real good thing here. But this has really, it's a very dangerous thing that he just did. Trump has basically declared war in the Middle East, according to a top Palestinian diplomat. More importantly than that, the U.S. government for decades has maintained the position of mediator and objective negotiator between Israeli interests and Arab interests, and Donald Trump just abdicated that role. So right now there is no mediator in the Middle East working towards a peace plan. The peace plan between Israel and Palestine is dead. The two-state solution is now dead, and that leaves only one other alternative. And this is angering a lot of people. It's angering the more moderate Christians. It's angering the Muslims. It was a reckless thing for him to do. This gets back to what I was saying last year during the campaign, that Donald Trump was coming into the White House as dangerously naive about politics as Jimmy Carter, because there was a reason all these previous presidents resisted doing this, despite the entreaties and pressure coming from Israel and AIPAC and their Jewish financial supporters. There was a very good reason, because it could inflame the entire Middle East in a war. Unless that's what Trump wants, for the entire Middle East to go up in flames, along with the oil, this was a very reckless and dangerous thing for him to do. Now, Palestinians have declared 3 days of rage across the West Bank. The Arab world is completely outraged. Over in Iran, their premier is telling EU diplomats that change in Jerusalem status heightens tensions. It's making the region much more prone to war, and they're absolutely right about that. Now, over in Kuwaiti, they're saying that Palestinians have the right to sovereignty over Jerusalem, or at least East Jerusalem, because that was given to them by the United Nations. Now, the United Nations has passed numerous resolutions declaring that Jerusalem is not the capital of Israel. Jerusalem is a shared city. So along with angering the rest of the world, Donald Trump has basically defied the United Nations to do this. Iran and Turkey have both sent messages saying that Al-Quds, which is the other name for Jerusalem, is an inseparable part of Palestine, at least East Jerusalem. But we've seen how Israel's been trying to capture more and more of that. Now, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation is set to meet in Turkey to coordinate a response to Donald Trump's declaration of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Now, he didn't actually declare it. He simply recognized it. Israel's been saying it's our capital for a very, very long time. And every time they do, they get slapped down again by the United Nations. Russia is very concerned over what is about to happen. now that the U.S. is recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Even Reform Jews are saying this was not a good idea, that this basically is bringing to an end any possibility of a peaceful revolution to the crisis over there. Now, the reality is that both the Palestinians and Israelis claim Jerusalem as their capital. But you need to remember, before Palestine was chopped up to create the modern Israel, Jerusalem was the capital of Palestine. And that's why the United Nations said everybody's going to have to share it. It's a very important city to all these religions. But Israel doesn't want to share. And it's come on out, apparently, story in the Times of Israel, how Netanyahu and his aides were active partners in getting Trump to go along with this recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. And apparently Trump was also being spurred on by his biggest campaign contributor, billionaire casino magnate Sheldon Adelson, who was pushing on him to do that as well. All right, we're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just rejoining our network. And we're going to go ahead and take a phone call from Tony in Puerto Rico. Aloha, Tony. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah. Hello, Mike. This is Tony. Yeah. Listen, I'm happy Trump is doing what he's doing. Jerusalem should be the capital of Israel because it's about time that the third temple, Jewish temple, be rebuilt. But that's not why I'm calling.
I'd like to respond to that. I'd like to respond to that. Let me respond to that, okay? First of all, the site that's considered the temple today isn't really where the first temple was built. It was actually located on Mount Moriah, which is slightly to the southeast, and even Israeli archaeologists are saying what they're claiming is the remains of Herod's second and third temple, because there's already been a third temple, is actually the foundations of a Roman fort, Fort Antonio. And the way it goes is the first temple was destroyed by the Babylonians, then they built a second temple, and then Herod built a third temple, which, because the Messiah didn't show up, they went back and said, well, it was really just a renovation. But it wasn't. It was a complete from-the-ground rebuild. So there's a lot of mythology here that really doesn't stand up to scientific scrutiny.
Okay. Now, my original comment is this. In regards to the History Channel, do you think the History Channel is the real deal or just part of the mainstream media?
Some of their programs are very good and accurate, and some of them, yes, are propaganda, and that's true for virtually all of the so-called educational channels.
Okay. Thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Now, again, the United Nations Partition Plan declared Jerusalem to be a shared city among the major religions that hold it sacred. And all those other religions were willing to share. It's only Israel that says, we want it all. You're not allowed to come here. And yes, there is an agenda to tear down the Muslim temples, icons on the top of that platform of the Roman fort, and build a third temple. But this is all of this predictions and everything. This is fairy tale stuff coming from Bronze Age shepherders who wrote it all down. And that is really a very weak basis for formulating national policy, especially in the age of nuclear weapons. Anyway, there's another article over here that came on out about what was behind Trump's embassy move. And basically, Trump was talking about a desire to strike the ultimate deal between Israelis and Palestinians, but relocating the embassy, Washington's not going to be able to play an honest broker in future talks. The U.S. has ended its role as mediator and peacemaker in the Middle East. And that is just the real upshot of it all, because Jerusalem is going to stay Jerusalem, the Palestinians are still going to be there, the Muslims are still going to be there. All this really did is it angered everybody against each other. And it basically took the United States out of that process. Now, I'm willing to bet a nickel here. We're going to see Putin go on down there and try and calm things down. It's going to be very, very difficult to do, because all of the Arab nations, except for Saudi Arabia, which is clearly on board with the U.S. and Israeli agenda. But all those nations are now talking about uniting, and uniting with Palestine, which is exactly what Israel, we think, would like to avoid. Now, apparently the Palestinian mission in Washington was planning to have a Christmas party on Capitol Hill. And now that Donald Trump has recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, they've canceled that. They figure it's kind of a lost cause. Meanwhile, U.S. lawmakers have voted to suspend aid to the Palestinian Authority unless they halt payments to the families of Palestinians detained or killed by Israel. So they're just tightening the screws. And it's very obvious at this point that the United States is not objective and unbiased in the issue between Israel and Palestine. It's very obvious that the United States has been totally co-opted by the government of Israel, and everybody around the world just got to see it. And frankly, I was very disgusted with Donald Trump, where he's out there talking about, well, you know, this is the only democracy in the Middle East, which is nonsense. A lot of those countries used to have fair elections until they got bombed by the United States. Anyway, we're going to take another phone call. Ramsey in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, sir. Lisa, I just want to tell you something. You mentioned the partition plan, and Jerusalem was part of that plan. But see, sir, I just want to tell people that the whole partition plan from the beginning was illegal. You see, what happened is that the Palestinians were like 70% of the population. The Jews at the time were like 30%. And Israel became, and the UN allocated 56% of the land to the Jewish people there. The Palestinians who were there in the first place got 44% of the land. So the whole partition plan was completely nonsense. Like that land should have never been partitioned in the first place. These Jews came in when the British occupied it after World War I, occupied Palestine, I mean, and then they came in the 1920s and 30s and 40s, and then. And then the UN people reluctantly did that under United States pressure to partition it. But see, sir, according to the UN Charter and the UN rules and the UN Constitution, whatever you want to call it, the creation of Israel is completely wrong. Just like the Jewish people in the West Bank today are illegal.
Yes. But Israel operates like, you know, they're above the laws of man because they're the chosen of God. And that really is the attitude they seem to evince in everything that they do.
And also, sir, you mentioned the Reformed Jews are against it. Now,
yes.
see, so I just want to ask you something. Well, what's the difference between a Reformed Jew and an Orthodox Jew, and aren't all these Jews the same?
No, actually, there's quite a bit of difference between their different approaches to their religion. And the Reformed Jews were against this decision for not for religious reasons, but for very pragmatic ones, because they understand that the more Israel wages war on the rest of the world, the more hostility there's going to be against Israel. And because Israel intentionally blends in its national identity with that of the Jewish people as a whole around the world, Israel is actually making the world a more dangerous place for the Jewish people. Especially now that the open borders have blended all kinds of already angry Muslims into Europe and the United States.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Moving right along. I mean, it almost seems like somebody wants to see rioting in the streets of Europe and America between Christians and Muslims. Because after opening the borders and flooding Europe and the United States with these Muslim refugees who are committing all these crimes and rapes, and we'll have more of that stuff later in the show here, all you need is a match to touch it off, and you're going to have race riots, religious riots, holy wars, crusades in the streets of our largest cities around the world. Now, a lot of people were asking just what Donald Trump is going to get in exchange from Israel for doing this. Obviously, Israel should be grateful. There should be a quid pro quo, but apparently that's not really true, because there's an article that came out in the Jerusalem Post, where Education Minister Naftali Bennett said that, no, there's not going to be anything Israel gives to the U.S. for this. They did the right thing. Why should we reward them for doing what was right in the first place? And you need to remember this same guy is calling the corruption investigations into Netanyahu fluff and noise. So he's totally, totally corrupt. Now, France has come out of left field with an interesting suggestion. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. But basically, the ambassador of Palestine to France, Salman al-Harfi, has said the French government has expressed a desire to recognize Palestine along those original borders, but it has to be part of the European Union to do that. Now, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Palestine is a long ways away from the Union, but again, the EU is more economic than anything else. But that's an idea that the French are floating here. Meanwhile, Israel is already back to whining because apparently up at the European Union Embassy, they were planning to host a photo gallery about how Palestinians have suffered under Israeli occupation. And the exhibition was titled 50 Years, 50 Portraits of Palestinians Born in 1967, and it was funded by Israeli rights group B'Tselem, and it was supposed to open in the city of Jaffa tomorrow. And the foreign ministry spokesman, Emmanuel Nachshon, basically came on out and said it's patronizing attitude of the EU's hypocritical moral preaching, which creates distance rather than closeness. And basically came on out and said, yeah, this is incitement. This is incitement. Well, the reality is Israel has been doing all these things. And they want to go on doing all these things. They just don't want anybody to document it or talk about it. They love that word anti-defamation. Doesn't mean bad things did not happen, just that you're not allowed to talk about it. And you really ought to read up on the history of just how the Anti-Defamation League came into existence. It will open your eyes as to what their job really is. Now then, apparently, getting into domestic politics, another Mueller deputy has been caught sending anti-Trump messages. And apparently this top prosecutor told one of the Obama holdovers who refused to defend the travel ban, oh, I'm so proud of you, I'm in awe. And so apparently this is a major problem. Mueller's staff are clearly biased. Now, interestingly enough, a former judge has come on out and said that if General Michael Flynn was not aware that Strzok was removed for bias, the entire case against him for perjury can be dismissed under what's called a Giglio violation. This goes back to a United States Supreme Court decision in which the fact that a witness was biased, or the fact that, in this case, an investigator is biased, was not conveyed to the defense counsel, invalidated the entire trial. So they may just have shot their own perjury case down after how many months and $7 million. Mueller's come up with absolutely nothing. Now, Chuck Grassley is demanding the FBI produce all of the text messages sent by Peter Strzok and to his mistress as part of this investigation of an anti-Trump bias within the Mueller Special Counsel Office, and they're certainly going to find it. So this situation is really heating up. And more interestingly, the House Intelligence Committee is getting ready to start writing a contempt resolution for top FBI and Justice Department officials who stalled in terms of explaining why Peter Strzok was removed from the special counsel's Russia probe. Everybody knew he'd been removed, but they weren't saying why. The committee asked months ago what was going on, and they never got an answer. All right, we're going to take a break for some commercials here. We have a caller waiting on the line when we come back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. It's time to grab your paper and pencil here, because if you would like to keep Republic Broadcasting and what really happened on the air, here's the address where you can send in your support. Check, money order, box tops, treasure maps, anything that you have there. The address is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. Or if you want to phone in a donation with a credit card or debit card, the number is 800-724-2719, extension 03. And I got to tell you, we really need you to pitch in and help, or we're going to have to sell John Stedmiller for medical experiments. That's how desperate we are right now. We're going to go to the telephones now. Mandy in New York, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you just fine.
Hi. Well, firstly, I wanted to say that I've primarily stuck to RBN because a lot of other alternative media has just become seemingly paid propagandists for the Trump administration, and they've just turned totally neocon with their output. So I appreciate that you have stood by at least the principle of the truth about certain things, like Israel, for example. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to make a comment about what you said about the Muslims going into Europe.
Yes.
I think, and notice a lot of other people feel the same way. One of the biggest reasons that's happening, that immigration issue and the refugee crisis, I think it's to have the Jewish people inside Europe become so frightened and feel like they're being attacked that they move to Israel, and that will justify an expansion of the borders. It will justify Israel's existence, which is constantly in question. And we wanted to get your opinion on that.
Well, that may be an aspect of it, but the point I was trying to make is that we have seen this flood of Muslim refugees who do not represent the best of the people in the source countries pouring in all across Europe, already causing all kinds of problems, especially in places like Sweden. Same thing here in the United States, and the media is trying to keep a lid on this in Europe. They've actually passed laws saying that when there is a rape or something like that, you can't mention the ethnicity of the suspect, and in many cases not even the name. They're protecting these people better than they are protecting the actual victims here. And then all of a sudden, when you've got this explosive mixture already blended together in Europe and the U.S., you strike a match to it by recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. There's a part of me that wonders if somebody somewhere actually does want to see Christian-Muslim riots in the streets of the cities. Because it strikes me as almost too well coordinated to just be happenstance. And I'm sure that one of Donald Trump's advisors, when he was talking about this decision, had to say, look, this is going to cause problems, not only just in the Middle East, it's going to cause problems all over Europe and right here in the U.S.
No, I absolutely agree, but I think maybe it isn't the primary goal, or what I mean is it could be a desired result of what's happening, and like you're saying, I think it's intentional, and I'm just so disappointed. I didn't vote at all. I didn't want Hillary or Trump, but well, anyway, thank you, Mike. That was the only comment I had to make.
All right, well, Mandy, thank you very much for the phone call, and I think it's important to understand that had Hillary stolen the White House, we'd still be here, because all of these events were apparently part of a master plan that has been pushed forward, and we know that Hillary would have gone along with this just in an absolute heartbeat. All right, so the phone lines are now open again. Al Franken has announced he's going to make an announcement tomorrow, and it's already leaked on out that he's going to resign. And there are now 11 Democratic senators demanding that he resign, and it looks like he's going to go ahead and do it. And who knows, maybe he'll return to comedy or something. But that's Senator Gillibrand, Senator Hirono from right here in Hawaii, Senator McCaskill, Senator Hassan, Senator Harris, Senator Murray, Senator Baldwin, Senator Casey, Senator Donnelly, Senator Brown, and Senator Stabenow. And so this attempt to bring down Judge Roy Moore with a sexual allegation smear has backfired horribly, and it's taking out some of the lights of the Democratic Party. And they've well and truly hoisted with their own petard, which I know it sounds dirty if you don't understand what I mean by that phrase. But we might also be seeing a pattern of knocking out potential competitors for the 2020 Democratic primary race, because despite claims to the contrary, Hillary Clinton still looks like she's getting ready to run again. And she's going to want to knock out anybody who would even stand a chance against her. And these people that have come on down, Conyers, Al Franken, these were name Democratic stars. Most people you pass in the street and you'll say, can you name all the Democratic senators? No. But you know Conyers. Oh, yeah, we know Conyers. How about Al Franken? Oh, yeah. You know, I loved him. Less now than when he was on Saturday Night Live, but yeah. So these stars, these potential challengers in the 2020 Democratic primaries seem to be the targets of a lot of this. Just something to think about as we take another commercial break. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, there has been more fallout from this Agent Peter Strzok because of the fact that he was dismissed for bias. That was withheld from Flynn's defense lawyers, which may, in fact, undermine the legitimacy of the entire case. But he was also one of the FBI agents who interrogated Hillary over the email server. He didn't put her under oath. He's the same guy who took that fake Trump dossier that the Democrats paid for and used it to open the bogus investigation into Trump. That FISA warrant that they claim legitimizes everything they did is absolutely worthless because it's based on false information. So now it looks like there are some representatives in Congress that are starting to get a little bit of spine. And they're saying it's time to start investigating the investigation into Hillary Clinton's email server. And I wholeheartedly agree. Because if I am correct, and Hillary was replaying the 1994 Chinagate gambit, then she was selling U.S. secrets to foreign interests using her weak email server to deliver the goods and her so-called charitable foundation to collect and launder the money. And prior to her losing the election, a significant portion of the funds coming into the Clinton Foundation came from foreign sources. Now, a retired CIA officer reportedly working with Blackwater founder Eric Prince to sell the White House on this idea of a privatized global spy network, which unfortunately they've already brought Oliver North into it, which means the narcocracy is already being protected. But apparently he is claiming that National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster worked with the NSA to perform the surveillance on Donald Trump Jr., Eric Trump, Steve Bannon, and others. This is in a report out of The Intercept. And if these revelations are true, and there's no reason to doubt them, this is a bombshell report, and Trump should fire McMasters as quickly as possible. Because McMasters has obviously been working against Donald Trump. As I said before, the hard part about trying to drain that swamp is the only ones showing up at the employment line are with the water moccasins and the alligators. Now, Hillary is still out there making personal appearances. She's out there trying to promote her image, sell her book. And Linda Tripp basically came on out and said, it's time to really point out what's really been going on. And she was on Daily Mail TV and basically said that Hillary Clinton is a destroyer of women should they get in her way. And she talks about all the lives. And by the way, it's not just women. It's also us guys who won't stay silent about Vince Foster. But destroyed all the women who leveled accusations against Bill Clinton, some of which ultimately turned out to be true. And apparently Hillary fed off Bill Clinton's power when he was president. She really is redefining what the phrase power mad bitch really means. And in another way to get her face in front of everybody, and you're going to love this, okay, there is a company that now has, just in time for Christmas, produced a 3D printed treetop angel of Hillary Clinton. It's around $140, and it's being marketed under the slogan, "A woman to look up to." So you're going to have your Christmas tree with all the stuff, and there on the very point is going to be Hillary Clinton. And I'm going to tell you right now, don't buy the Hillary angel for your tree because they keep falling over. Now, once again, Democrats attempted to bring impeachment charges against Trump, and they promptly got shot down by an overwhelming majority of the House of Representatives. There wasn't anything there. The legitimate purpose of impeachment is to remove a president who has provably committed a high crime or misdemeanor. You can't just impeach the president because you're upset that he beat your candidate last year. Now, everybody's been talking about Time Magazine's Person of the Year. And apparently in their online poll, somehow, Crown Prince bin Salman was the leader, well and away. A lot of people are suspecting that there were hackers who were trying to run up his number to get him on the face. And ultimately it turned out, though, that Time's Person of the Year is actually persons, and they're called the Silence Breakers. And these are these people who came forward and started blowing the whistle about Harvey Weinstein and these various politicians. And again, the rationale for Time's Person of the Year is who really significantly changed things. And yeah, there's absolutely no question these people stirred up the pot in a really, really huge way. All right, so it's time for us to get on over into the war zones, emphasis on the plural. Apparently over in Syria, the Tiger forces have reached al-Bakamal, and on the same day, 6 Russian Tu-22 M3 strategic bombers carried out a massive strike on ISIS positions near al-Sayal, destroying weapons depots, strong points, and concentrations of ISIS members. Now, the Syrian Arab Army and its allies continue their advance towards Sayal, and according to pro-government sources, they even reached positions of the SAA near al-Bakamal. So it's really going very well for the government of Syria, and the U.S. is still struggling to find some way that they can justify staying in Syria, even though the government of Syria would like them to go, and even though probably most Americans are saying it's time to come home. But I think what the U.S. is investing all this money and lives in is not that they think they still have a way to defeat Bashar al-Assad and take over. They just don't want to admit that they lost. So as long as they stay in Syria, they can walk around and say, no, we haven't lost, we're still here, everything's just fine. Same thing in Afghanistan, same thing in Iraq. Because if you go back and you look at the history of Vietnam, when that war was over and the U.S. had been well and truly defeated, got their hide whipped, there was actually a very long interval after that before the U.S. government got into any more overt conflicts in other countries, because the American people just weren't supporting it. We just lost a war. We didn't want to get into another one. Now, as you know, over in Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu has been ranting and raving about Iran and how bad they are, and they're the new Nazi Germany, and they want to kill all the Jews, blah, 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 blah. And Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif is accusing Netanyahu of fake history over his comment that Iran has sought the annihilation of the Jews just as had ancient Persia. And those are absolute lies, and you need look no further than Jewish scripture. The book of Esther tells of how Xerxes I saved Jews from a plot hatched by Haman the Agagite, which is basically part of the Purim holiday. Jews see Queen Esther as the heroine of Purim for talking Persian king Ahasuerus out of killing all the Jews in the kingdom, as his viceroy had convinced him to do. Zarif in the text also credited Cyrus the Great, who he called an Iranian king, with saving the Jews during their exile in Babylon. And don't forget, during World War II, Iran gave sanctuary to Jews who were fleeing the slaughter in Europe. So, all right, we're going to start taking phone calls here. Charlie in Los Angeles, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Quick, that last comment about Iraq is like almost, controlled by the Jews. I mean, the community there, our equivalent Secretary of Commerce in Iran is Jewish. I mean, that's all crap. But what I want to talk about, Mike, is Trump and his moving the embassy hasn't anything to do about he expects anything in return. He's just paying back the Jews that bailed him out of bankruptcy in the early days in New York with all the casinos and the hotels and everything that he got his hands into, probably with mafia money. So he's not expecting anything in return. He was vaulted into the presidency to pay them back. Now, whether this is going to cause world tension to start getting out of control, I doubt it. It'll probably blow over in another month or so. But I just wanted to make that comment. So as far as Iran goes, I don't know why. It's just a convenient way to, tell the people that are, that grew up on video games, this is, a threat to Israel. But anybody that knows anything about that country of Iran, it's all lies, been lies for 25 years.
Yes. Israel has been claiming for going on 30 years that Iran is just weeks away from a nuclear weapon. And they just keep pushing this lie out there. And you have to go back and look at the real history. Iran is not a warlike nation. It's been 200 years since Iran initiated a war of conquest against another country. And that's a record, obviously, that neither Israel nor the United States can match. They can't seem to go 6 months without proving how butch they are by dropping bombs on somebody. Well,
they complain and get worried about Iran getting a nuclear weapon. Maybe it's because they don't have them. They don't have them themselves. Maybe they're just fooling everybody and making you think they have nuclear weapons. It's much cheaper and easier to handle.
Well, I seriously doubt that, because we know that they acquired the materials necessary to build a bomb from what was called the NUMEC scandal here in the United States of America. And when the former apartheid government of South Africa fell and the new government came on in, they uncovered paperwork that showed that Israel was not only helping South Africa try and develop their own nuclear warhead, but at one point they offered to sell one of Israel's nuclear weapons to South Africa. Now, the paperwork seems to indicate the deal didn't go through to completion. But obviously, if you're selling a nuclear weapon to another country, it's going to be a real operating nuclear weapon. And don't forget what came on out with Mordecai Vanunu, where he basically worked in that bomb factory hidden under the Dimona reactor, and he took all the pictures which were published in the Western press, for which Israel has continued to whoop on him ever since. No, I think Israel really does have nuclear weapons. They maintain the policy of nuclear ambiguity because they know that under United States law, they cannot receive any financial aid from the American taxpayer as long as they have nuclear weapons but refuse to sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty or allow IAEA inspections.
Can I comment on what you just said?
Sure.
Yeah, I think the Mordecai Vanunu thing is a hoax. I mean, the Jews have killed people for a lot less than that. I mean, they wanted him to do that to make people think they have the nukes. And if they do have nukes, they're probably going to be duds. And if you drop a dud, you're going to really get crushed. I mean, there's 300 million Arabs, surrounding them. You can't afford to be dropping duds anywhere. So, okay, well, all right, Mike, thanks for taking my call.
All right, well, I think Israel certainly acts like it's got the nuclear weapons and that nobody dares invade them. Could it be a bluff? Who knows? Israel's lied about so many other things. I tend to think that, yes, given the situation with NUMEC, the fact that there is a working factory capable of making bombs underneath Dimona, and that's not just from Mordecai Vanunu. Even Israeli TV actually did a documentary going on down there and saying, yeah, this is where we make the bombs. All right, let's take another phone call. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Mike, I think you just made a mistake before about Syria, saying that the United States lost. The United States actually won. The American people won. Who lost is this evil, wicked, globalist government, or at least elements of it, has taken over this country, and you see examples of it with the FBI, the CIA, and all these crooks now that they're, finally people are starting to look at and say, that they were, they're acting like a police state. They are acting like a police state. So I don't think the United States, I think the American people actually won Syria. Thank God Assad was able to overcome these terrorists who, unfortunately, the United States and Israel and Saudi Arabia actually supported, maybe Turkey also.
Yes.
So that. Wouldn't you say that's the case?
Well,
in reality,
it's one way of looking at it, but I tend to look at the issue from the point of view of the average American who's just sick and tired of war, they have a very simplistic way of looking at the war and saying, we're in Syria, we're trying to get ISIS and Al-Qaeda, we're trying to get Bashar al-Assad. If the U.S. gets kicked out, to most people it's going to look like a military defeat. And again, that would pull the rug out from under the momentum the U.S. has tried to build up, attacking all these other countries. And they still haven't managed to start hostilities against Iran. But at the point where it's obvious that we've lost in Syria, that we pretty much are just hanging on in Afghanistan, I think the American people are going to start saying, it's time to call this off. It has bled this nation dry economically. Our infrastructure is rotting on the vine from neglect, and we really cannot sustain this war economy much longer.
Right. Hey, did that guy just say before that Iran actually has a Jewish minister or something?
Yeah, there are Jews in the Iranian government. I mean, if Iran was this evil entity that wanted to kill Jews, they would start with the Jews that live inside their country. And by the way, many of those are the descendants of the Jews that were given sanctuary when they fled what was going on in Europe. One of the world's oldest continuously operating synagogues is in Iran. Some years ago, trying to reverse that demographic problem that Israel is dealing with, they attempted to lure the Iranian Jews back to Israel with very generous financial incentives. And the Iranian Jews said, no, we've lived here all of our lives. All of our friends are here. We've got businesses. We've got homes. And no, we don't need to move down to Israel and deal with all the nasty stuff that's going on down there. And it was a huge embarrassment for the government of Israel.
And the other thing I wanted to ask you is, what do you think is going to happen now with this? I think Trump is making a mistake what he did today with Jerusalem, but all the neocons and even the conservatives, so-called conservatives. I say so-called because it mixes neocons, and all the others are saying what a great thing this is. I think. What do you think? Do you think this is going to start another war, or do you think this is just going to be going to blow over? It really doesn't really mean much. It's just like what do you call it again?
Well,
it's just facade.
I'd like it to blow over, to be very honest. I don't think it's going to start a war. I could be wrong on that one as well. I think it is very possible that we are going to see clashes between Muslims and Christians in all of these countries in Europe that have been flooded with these refugees, and even here in the United States of America. Now, as far as what Trump has actually done, as I mentioned earlier in the show, he has basically yanked the United States out of its presumed role as arbiter of peace in the Middle East. And now there is no peacemaker in there, and that's why war is definitely much more possible. Anyway, Mark, we got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back with another phone call. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go back to the telephones. Don in the Philippines. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Yeah, I just wanted to see if I could get through because it's an 800 number. I'm in the Philippines, but I was surprised that I got right through. But, yeah, as far as Trump, with this Jerusalem, that was one of his promises, I believe. One of his campaign promises was that he was going to restore the capital to Jerusalem. But I agree with you. It doesn't make any sense, and I don't know why. The whole idea of Israel, in my opinion, Israel has no right to exist. It would be like the Manhattan Indians. There was an Indian tribe, the Manhattan Indians. They'd all of a sudden demand Manhattan Island in New York City.
Well, the problem is the Jews who are living in Israel right now are not even the descendants of the biblical Hebrews. The majority of Jews living in Israel are Ashkenazis, who are actually descended from Central Asian Khazars who converted to Judaism in 800 AD. Now, that would be like me converting to some Native American religion and then start demanding a chunk of the United States be turned over because we were here first. I mean, that is how thin that entire argument is.
It's not right. I mean, I don't know what eventually is going to happen, but even if they do exist, there's even less rationale for the United States to strain every fiber of its being to try to pump up Israel and give Israel money. I mean, if they can exist on their own, then maybe they can go ahead and make a go of it. But anyway,
they've got a very healthy economy. They've got a very strong economy. They don't need our money. They just want it. And unfortunately, we have all of these dual nationals who are in our government in key positions of power, and we have this organization called AIPAC that is literally engineering a Congress that will basically bow to whatever it is that Israel wants. We're an occupied nation. We have a puppet government in Washington, D.C., or if you want to call it that, a Vichy government in Washington, D.C., ruling this country for the benefit of a foreign power. And it's time we all realize that's what's been going on. And we should be very angry and upset. The people of Iraq didn't like living under a puppet regime. The people of Libya didn't like living under a puppet regime. The people of Yemen didn't like living under a puppet regime. The people of Afghanistan didn't like living under a puppet regime. Why should we be any more accepting of that condition of life than these other people?
We shouldn't. And also Trump, when I voted for him, I thought he was going to be a real strong man, a tough guy. And here he is basically being bossed around by his son-in-law, looks like.
Yeah, that's very obvious, and his son-in-law definitely is pro-Israel, and unfortunately, again, we're seeing world politics being shaped by this religious belief, that goes back, as I said, again, to the time of the Bronze Age. It is totally out of touch with our realities. Anyway, Don, we've got to let you go and take a break for station identification, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and let's get back into the news here. Now, prior to the assassination of former President of Yemen, Saleh, the general consensus of opinion was that Saudi Arabia had gotten tired, they were worn out, they were about ready to throw in the towel. Saleh was climbing in popularity and influence in the country once again. And then, of course, he was killed, and nobody's really still sure who did it. The Houthis are getting the blame. But ever since Saleh's death, the Saudi coalition has greatly intensified airstrikes against Yemen. And they did dozens of airstrikes in positions of the Houthi Ansarallah movement in Sana'a and northern provinces yesterday, despite calls for a humanitarian ceasefire in the country. And the coalition also bombed the presidential palace, Saleh's residence, and houses of his family members. And that right there is reason to suspect that Saleh wasn't necessarily killed by the Houthis, who he'd been supportive and working with up until quite recently. Now, over in Ukraine, we might be about to see something dramatic happen there because Pravy sector radicals have given Petro Poroshenko a 72-hour ultimatum that he stop all the lawlessness in the country, or the ATO will come to Kiev, and ATO is the zone of anti-terrorist operation, as the Kiev authorities call the civil war against Donbass. So Donbass has been playing defense, just holding on to their territory, but apparently they've given Poroshenko this 72-hour ultimatum. If you don't stop this, if you don't stop attacking us, we're going to start attacking you. We're going to go on the offensive. And that may be a significant threat, because there was this other story that came out of FortRuss.com on how Americans are practicing how to evacuate Poroshenko from Ukraine. And they took 2 of these Ka-27 helicopters, and they're basically flying them on in, practicing the route, and verifying that they can land on the deck of an American ship. So we may be seeing something dramatic about to happen there. Meanwhile, the U.S. is sending B-1B Lancer bombers to South Korea to take part in this week-long joint military exercise following Pyongyang's latest missile test. and it's an unspecified number of the long-range bombers. Maybe they figured they'd better get them on over there because the F-22s and the F-35s were not looking really good in actual service. If you will remember, F-22 lost power, did get back to the air base, had to be towed off the runway, and yesterday an F-35 was literally losing pieces out of the fuselage in flight, which tells you it probably would not do very well when it's actually being fired upon. Now, the corporate media has come out with this report that North Korea's last missile test was a failure because the reentry cone broke up on impact with the atmosphere. And it may be that somebody over there who's ever analyzing this doesn't really understand orbital reentry, or they just hope that you don't. Because the way a nuclear missile is designed to work is to follow a very shallow path just out of the atmosphere into the vacuum of space, and then a gradual reentry into the atmosphere, like a returning Mercury, Gemini, or Apollo spacecraft, and then deploy for the targets. Now, the test missile, just to test the engine, went straight up 2,800 miles and then came straight back down, which means it slammed into the atmosphere like it was a brick wall. Remember all the talk about when they were trying to get Apollo 13 back to the Earth, and they had to hit this just right corridor? Because if they came in too steep, they would burn up. And that may be what happened. And maybe the North Koreans weren't expecting this thing to survive a direct head-on impact to the atmosphere. In fact, that weapons cone may have just been, an empty shell. But I don't think you can look at that and say that this was necessarily a failure. It's what you would expect in a test that goes straight up and straight down. All right, let's take some phone calls here. We're going to go to Frank in Pennsylvania. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Okay, Mike, very good. With this moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, we don't have an American Middle East policy. We have an Israeli Middle East policy.
Yes.
And President Trump,
since 9/11.
Especially, right. And President Trump is really a disappointment because for whose benefit is to move this embassy? It doesn't benefit the American people. No. It's just going to cause more unrest. It's going to cause us to get into another $1 trillion foreign entanglement in the Middle East by the time everything is all said and done. And if you wonder why, Michael, if you wonder why China is building super cities for their people and Japan is building monorails that go up to 200 miles an hour, because they're not involved in foreign entanglements like we are. They're taking care of their people's business, and that is true. China is building super cities.
Yes. And
Japan has one of the best mass monorail systems, even tops Europe.
Yes.
So if you want to think about this in layman's terms, what we spent on the Iraq war, and that was basically to benefit Israel, without a doubt. What we spent on the Iraq war, we could have paid off every single student loan debt in the United States of America. But we don't do that for our people. We get involved in these foreign entanglements, and what it does is it bleeds this nation, our treasury, and our people. And Trump was very, very much a disappointment.
Yes.
Because he should leave it alone. They got to learn how to work out their own problems. We have this country, and these kids are graduating with student loan debt that is amassed, would take years to pay off. And in addition to that, we have crumbling highways, infrastructure. My goodness, look around, people, what this country has become since I was a kid in the 50s.
Yes.
We are going down, and it's because we keep on getting involved with these Middle East foreign entanglements on the benefit of a very few handful of people. And that's what I got to say, Michael.
Well, there's another aspect that most people don't really talk about, and that is the fact that given that Israel does have nuclear weapons, they can use them as a threat against much of the world. Not directly, but what they could do is nuke the Middle East oil fields and leave them so radioactive they can't be used anymore, and that would collapse the oil-based economy around the world. And I think it was Ariel Sharon used to joke about how the Arabs may have all the oil, but we've got the matches. And so there's the implied threat there. You do what Israel wants, or we'll burn up all the oil.
Right, you're right with that. But I tell you what, there's a young man. His name is Elon Musk.
Yes.
He's doing wonders with this company called Tesla, and one day we're going to be off this foreign oil. And this is what's, you're right, it brings it down. But I'm just saying, Japan is oil, needs oil, and so does China, but they are taking care of their people, Michael, way better than we ever did, for the last 20 years.
Yes.
We get involved. Just think from the first Gulf War on, 1991 on, it's a never-ending Middle East conflicts. This nonsense in Syria now, we got to worry about Iran and Iraq and this. It's bleeding our treasury, and we got to be, as a people, to say enough's enough.
There's nothing in the treasury. What we're doing is we're building up more debt to the private central bank, which the private central bank really likes. But we've been living in a wartime economy now for 2 decades. They don't want to admit it, but that's the reality. And again, look at the decayed infrastructure, the massive homelessness, the massive unemployment, the fact that the government lies about the unemployment and the rate of inflation. Go down the streets of your nearby town, look at all the retail vacancies. This nation is dying on the vine, and it's being bled dry for the war machine. And still there's money to keep giving more money to Israel all the time, because Israel's got a hammerlock on the U.S. government through Sionim, who are in positions of influence, through politicians they control, either through contribution or direct blackmail. And it really is a scandal. And I don't see how this country is going to be able to survive this government is going to be able to survive much longer.
You're absolutely right, Michael. But what we need to do is you need to be speaking to 50 million people instead of 500,000, because you got to wake up the American people. I'm awake.
I'm doing my best.
A lot of these RBN listeners are awake.
I'm doing my best.
But I pass you on your information on everybody I see, Michael. But bless you for all the work you do, and keep up the good work. You stand with the righteous. You are righteous in what you say, Michael, and that's the truth.
Thank you very much for those kind words. We're going to let you go and do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And we're going to go back to the telephones to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike. You can't save everybody in the country. So for those who are awake, got to stay prepared. Don't know when it's going to happen, but it's going to happen. But yeah, hey, Mike, I know you know this, but in 3 years, the Chinese use more concrete than we use in 100 years. And in 6 years, they use more concrete than in our lifetime. They got the world's fastest train system.
Yes.
They got brand new infrastructure, brand new highways. They're modernized. We're not. That tells you everything you need to know what's going on. We're a war machine, and we're in decline, and we said this before over and over. And my God, Mike, it's amazing how people are focused on this. Russia did this, Russia did that. It's just everything's a diversion, because we're in a dying empire, and so is part of Europe, because that's part of the same empire. It's a shame how people just focus on minuscule things like Kim Kardashian and kneeling for the football, and it's all garbage, man. It's like get yourself prepared and protect your family. And you don't know when it's going to come, but it's going to come, because you can see it. The decline is already happening.
Oh, yeah, it's very obvious. Now, for very young people where this is all they've ever known, their lives, they don't see it. But for us older people, we've been watching the nation rot away for a very, very long time. A couple of footnotes I'd like to add to that. If I recall correctly, the current world's record holder for fastest supercomputer is in China, and China just completed the world's largest non-steerable radio telescope. And it dwarfs the one at Arecibo. Huge thing, absolutely huge.
That's the new empire, Mike. It's a fact. Eurasia is the new empire. That's why we fear Russia. It's part of the new empire. I know people don't want to hear it. It's a fact. We're in decline, but you can't save everybody in this country that don't want to listen. You got to get your own family and your own affairs in order. Mm-hmm. Protect yourself, your wife, your kids. And Mike, with Trump, with this moving, like, how does this make America great again? That's why I want to ask all the people who I voted for Trump, but the people who still support Trump, how does this make America great again? It has nothing to do with. This is about a small percentage of like Talmud worshipers. Like in Israel.
And I understand he did make this promise during his campaign, and it raised a little bit of concern. But it concerns me that this seems to be one of the few campaign promises he's actually carrying forward on. He promised no more foreign interventions. That promise was broken. He promised to put Hillary in jail. Nothing is being done. Either he totally bamboozled us all, or he's been totally compromised or threatened, or however it's come about. We did not get the Donald Trump we voted for. And yes, I'm just as disappointed as you are. And of course, probably would have been worse under Hillary. And that, I think, is really a statement about our current society, that every election is always trying to find out the lesser of two evils.
Mike, we're decadent, and Kenny Rogers had that song, when to hold and when to fold. Yes. I think it's time to fold Donald Trump because it's over for him. It's over for us.
He's a one-term president.
He's going to do anything.
He's probably going to survive all these attempts at impeachment and 25th Amendment. They may even take a shot at him, which I think would be a very destabilizing thing. But he's going to be a one-term president. He just blew off his chances in 2020. And I think that's why Hillary looks like she's already trying to maneuver the chessboard so she can take another run. Or in her case, a stagger toward the White House.
Yeah, like Stalin said, Mike, it's not who votes, it's who counts the votes. And it's the same with the economy and everything. It's who controls everything. It's who writes the tax code, benefits from the tax code. When are people going to understand that? Yes. Like Goldman Sachs wrote it, they're going to benefit from it and their friends. You're not. You're paying more in taxes. And, if you want to get angry enough, go out on the street. Otherwise, you can't keep saying, well, Trump's doing this, doing that. He didn't do anything.
No, he hasn't done anything. He's just sitting back and coasting and allowing the same old machine to move forward. Anyway, Dustin, we're going to let you go. The phone lines are loading up here. So we're going to switch over to Sean in Ventura, California. And, Sean, what a horrible mess you people are having to suffer through with all these fires.
Oh, my God. I can't even begin to explain it. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you fine.
Okay, great. It's a mess. I'm literally in ground zero right now. I could barely see across the street. The smoke is so thick, and it smells like a campfire throughout the entire city. And you can't even see the sun. Like, is absolutely brutal. And then I've had so many friends. Like, I'm safe where I'm at. I haven't been evacuated yet, but I've had so many friends, like refugees almost. Like, one of my friends was evacuated 3 times. Like, she literally, had to pack up her kids and her husband and, move, 3 times over the course of, 4 hours. And then I had a neighbor come by just a minute ago, said that, so we've been out of electricity for a couple of hours, couple days, but we're apparently going to lose water. So we're going to be out of water for the next 2 or 3 days.
Now you understand why we preppers think the way that we do.
Yeah, it's crazy. One of the things I wanted to say real quickly, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I heard you mention the fires yesterday, and I've been listening to you for the last 7 years, by the way. And you always mention the fire break roads, but honestly, the ambers can fly once the Santa Ana, because you're familiar with Santa Barbara. So I've lived in Ventura for 3 years.
I used to live in Southern California, and I've seen the Santa Ana winds, and I've seen these fires get out of control.
Yeah, and the ambers can fly miles. So I don't really think the fire did hop the 33 and the 126 and the 101. So I don't really feel like the fire break, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't really feel like the fire break roads really make that much of a difference.
Well, it's not just acting as fire breaks. It also gives the fire trucks additional access into those interior regions. So they do have to be kept open.
Yeah.
But I was watching the news this morning, and apparently the fire has reached as far east as the 405 freeway, which was shut down. and they were showing the fires actually getting into the Bel Air area. And that's, where all the really rich people are living. Hef's place is in there, although Hef isn't anymore.
Yeah. Well, I was in Santa Barbara when Montecito burned down, and like Bill Murray, Oprah, a whole bunch of people lost their houses.
Yes.
It's crazy.
Yeah. I remember one time.
Okay, I don't want to take up much more of your time.
All right. Well, listen, stay safe. Stay safe. If I would start bottling water while you still have water service, just to have it standing by here.
Yeah. Yeah. As soon as I get off the phone, I'm going to head over to the water store.
All right. I think that's a very, very good idea. So quit wasting your time with me and get on over and get some emergency supplies set in.
Okay. Well, thank you to you and your listeners.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We're going to let you go. And I remember one of the summers that I worked at Six Flags Magic Mountain. There were literally 3 wildfires on 3 different sides of the park, and they decided to shut it down and send all the guests home with rain checks. And as part of the street theater, our job was to make sure everybody was getting out cheerfully, there's nothing to worry about. And it was just this weird experience to stand there in the middle of all this working amusement park equipment, nobody around, and this orange sky. I wish I had a camera at the time. It was just surreal. We'll be back after
this.
Actually,
these are beautiful sunsets. Okay,
yeah, we get those with our volcanoes. We'll be back after these few words. America, welcome back to the show, and yes, we definitely do need your support to keep Republic Broadcasting and What Really Happened on the air, and if we don't get the support, we're going to have to start taking our control room techs and putting them out on the street corners with really short skirts and a lot of lipstick. So we really do need your help here. Okay, we're going to go on back to the telephones here. Ron in the Bronx. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, aloha. Hey, before I get to my topic, how do you get to the music again on your website? You told me before, but I keep forgetting, man.
We have a website. We have a website specifically for the radio show, and it's called WRHradio.com, and it's just some promo stuff on there. But halfway down the page, there's a link that says Music from the What Really Happened radio show, and you click that, and it will take you to a player where all the music that we have used throughout the years, all the stuff that Claire has written, all the stuff that other artists have very graciously granted us permission to use is there. And in the player, there are also links that go to the website of those artists so you can find out more about them.
Okay, and that's on halfway through the WRH radio website.
Yeah, just about halfway down the page. Yeah, it's a small page.
Okay, great. I wanted to ask you about the difference between, it's the nukes and atom bombs. I Googled it, but I would just like to hear your take on it. Because I know you say when the U.S. used nukes in Japan, but could you just explain the difference for atomic and nuclear?
Well,
I think they're the same thing, but...
Yeah, they are. They are. They're 2 different words, and it was kind of a matter of fashion. And part of the problem was when they started talking about nuclear weapons, Eisenhower, for some reason, started using the word nuclear, from which nukes eventually came, but it's the wrong pronunciation. And even George W. Bush was doing the same thing. He would always talk about Saddam's nuclear bombs. And so I think a lot of people just said, let's just use the word atomic. It's the same thing, and nobody's going to be able to mess that up.
Okay, because it makes it sound like a nuclear bomb is a lot worse when they're actually the same thing. Because when you say, well, we use atomic bombs in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, it's like people are trying to water it down, but it actually is a nuclear bomb. Like when you always say we're the only country to use nuclear weapons on a civilian population.
Yeah, they are the same thing. It's just 2 different words for the same thing.
All right, Mike. Thank you. Keep up the good work.
All right, thanks an awful lot. And
try to make a donation very soon too.
Please do.
Guys.
Please do. We're already buying the lipstick. All right, we're going to switch over here to.
Hey, one last question.
Okay, real quick.
Mike, where would you rather have a donation, to you or to the radio network?
Radio network.
Or RCN?
Well, actually, both, to be very honest, but to the radio network.
Okay. But radio network first in case. All right, Mike, thank you. Keep up the good work.
All right, thanks an awful lot, and we're going to switch over to Francis in North Carolina. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha to you both.
Aloha, Nui Nui.
Night Barnhall. No. You get me on that every time. Nui Nui. Of course, I've forgotten what that means.
It means more. And in the Hawaiian language, when you want something to be greater, you simply repeat the word. So an ali'i nui is a chief of a village, and the ali'i nui nui would be chief of the whole kingdom.
Gotcha. Hopefully I don't lose that one now. Anyway, the reason why I was calling is that I feel for the folks that are over in California that are dealing with the fires and all that kind of good stuff. But the original reason why I called is this. Especially for people that were born around the time of around the year 2000, the millennials or whatever the terminology you want to use this day and time is concerned, I'm trying to riddle out this logic from an illogical mind. Mm-hmm. If people that are that young see what's going on with the economy, they see what's going on with the societal so-called norms or whatever, or non-norms, the status quo, as it were, as to, you should go to college and get your degree for this or whatever have you to, propagate your life and so forth and live it comfortably. Seeing what's going on around them, unless they move to another state in the U.S., let alone out the continental U.S., for that matter, doesn't it kind of defy logic to go to college and get a degree and have to worry about a horrendous amount of a school loan or college loan, for that matter, you have to worry about for several years after leaving there and trying to find a job that you're not able to find because there's nothing available, which you should have seen to begin with, to be able to pay that off, let alone being able to live a decent life without having to reside at mom and dad's place.
Well, you're absolutely correct, and there are more and more experts who are saying that the harsh reality is, given that all the highly skilled jobs that require a college degree have gone to other countries, that most young people are probably better off not going to college and just getting on out into the job market and start building job skills and find their way forward, free of that debt. Like everything else in this country, higher education has been turned from a real service into a racket to just get people onto that debt hook and not let them off. Francis, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back with another phone call. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go right back to the telephones now to Mike in Maine. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, Mike? Just two quick comments, and I wanted to know what your opinion of Trump's recent announcement regarding Jerusalem was.
I'm sorry, you're in Michigan, not Maine. I just read that.
That's okay. I'm sure there's a Mike in Maine as well that thinks just like I do. I wanted to ask, after I made these very quick 2 points, the first is I noticed a lot of this is just mostly domestic politics, this announcement, which I took as hot air. I didn't think he was going to do it. He was going to actually say it. I thought at the last second it was going to be a really good excuse, but he wouldn't be able to do it. Now that he's done it, and seeing the reactions of leaders around the world and how they vary depending on their domestic perception of the Palestinian issue, I'm of the opinion that it's a great thing, really, for the peace process for the region, because now finally the United States government won't be perceived as a fair broker. And someone else will have to fill that void.
Which more likely,
it'll be interesting to see
I'm expecting to see Vladimir Putin step on in the way he did into the negotiations over Syria's chemical weapons. Putin has proven himself a global statesman, and if anybody's going to prevent a meltdown of the Middle East, I think it's going to be him. So go get him, Vlad.
I just find it, absolutely. And I think that, our foreign policy will be drastically affected as we see who used to be allies now leaning the other direction, which matters to us, I hope. And, I think it's a good thing. I'm just curious to know if you'd agree with that.
Well, I would agree with that because I think a lot of countries who are allies with the United States of America are now beginning to understand the United States is a failing empire. They can't even know their own mind. We're under the control of Israel, and I think a lot of our friends are going to start pulling back away out of concern that Israeli control is going to come through the United States into their countries and attempt to subvert them.
Well, where it matters, that's already happened. But I think it's also a good thing even if you're pro-Israeli and, you're always siding on their side of the argument somehow, this is bad for Israel if there is no two-state solution because, one state would mean, one or the other. You can't have both. It has to be a democratic state or it's going to be an apartheid state. This two-state thing was really the only out they had to keep the land and get legitimacy. So it's interesting now, the times that we live in.
Yeah, but the problem with that is Israel doesn't feel they need anybody's acknowledgement of legitimacy. Israel sees itself as legitimate, and anybody who's not agreeing with them as an anti-Semite and a Jew hater. And so they're not concerned about how the rest of the world thinks about them. They're in many ways a pirate kingdom, much like Tripoli originally was.
Mm-hmm. And just real quick, and I'll leave it with this question. What do you think of the new Crown Prince, King of Saudi Arabia overall, just generally speaking? And thanks for your radio show, Mike.
All right. Well, thank you very much. When bin Salman first was elevated to Crown Prince, I thought maybe it was going to be a breath of fresh air. But since taking hold of power, he's behaved in a very reckless manner, both in Yemen and in attempting to fill his coffers for the government by literally looting and plundering his rich people, which is certainly a better system than we have in the United States, where they're trying to loot the poor and middle class to fill up the government's coffers, because we don't really have all that much. We're tapped out here. But unfortunately, with the new GOP tax plan, it's very obvious Congress is worshiping the investor and, to be more blunt, the donor class. There was that one member of Congress who came on out literally and said the reason we're not worrying about tax cuts for the working poor and the middle class is they're just going to waste all that money on booze and women. And it was an absurd thing to say, and I hope it is brought up next time that they are running for re-election. All right, we're going to take another phone call. This is Tom in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, Michael, good day. And you're right on about what you said about Israel. They are controlling basically the United States. You're right on. And speaking of schmucks, Michael, Franken's going to have a conference tomorrow. I believe he's going to resign tomorrow.
That's
Looks
the word I get.
All the women in the Senate are going against him. So I think he's going to be going out, and we'll see what happens with that situation. But, Michael, what I do want to talk about, it's really on my mind, and it's really bothering me, is they keep talking this crap about Donald Trump and the Russian dossier and all this with this Mueller imbecile, this moron Mueller. In the meantime, you got this guy, Jerry Brown, who's breaking every federal law with immigration, with sanctuary cities. Yes. He should be rounded up and arrested. Donald Trump needs to go in there and arrest him with the feds. They got to go get these mayors in San Francisco, arrest them. When they put these guys in jail, the rest of these demon rats are going to get the message that there's no more games with federal law. Because, Michael, this is on the books. I was reading the books on immigration. Yeah. It's mind-blowing. It's unbelievable. I mean, the American public knew what was going on with immigration. They would have an explosion. Matter of fact, on Fox News this morning, they were talking about these illegal immigrants are costing the United States taxpayers $360 billion a year. I don't know if I got that figure right. I think that's what I saw, $360 billion.
Yes.
So where's this shaking out to be? This is not but a shakedown by the Democrats to get more voters into this country to vote Democrat for the free handouts, to flood this country with a different culture doesn't want to asylumate. They don't want to take the common language. Matter of fact, like I told you did last time I talked to you, Michael, they don't even want to take our they want to keep their own TV stations and radio stations. The Germans, the Italians, nobody else was able to do that. The Polish, the Swedes, they weren't allowed to keep 24 hours of broadcasting on radio and TV. Could you imagine if Germany would have done that? The Germans would have done that for 365 days a year, 24 hours of broadcasting TV and radio? That would have never happened. They wouldn't have allowed it. And what's really perplexing about that, Michael, is the United States Constitution was one vote away from being speaking a German country.
I know.
It was one vote away. This country is actually supposed to be speaking German. And by the way, another thing I found very perplexing is I didn't realize this, but there's more ethnic group of Germans in this country than any other group in this country, even English. There's more people that came from Germany of any other ethnic group that ever came to America. Did you know that?
Yeah, well, there was a huge influx of people from Germany who came here at the end of World War II, mostly in the form of war brides. And for the longest time after the end of World War II, a lot of Germans left the country. There wasn't anything there to work with, and it took a very long time to start to rebuild.
Correct. And getting back to immigration, Michael, one more thing. I know you got other callers. I'll make it quick. This thing with Trump now with the Russians and Mueller, that should be stopped. He should fire that guy immediately and say, you know what, I'm going after that clown Brown, that moonbeam insane clown Brown out in California who put a sanctuary cities. Because, Michael, that's setting a precedent. These other cities, all these mayors and these other 300 sanctuary cities should be rounded up and put in jail. Once they're in jail, you will see a change in this country like this. It'll be a massive earthquake. It'll be whatever they call it over there in Yellowstone, the Caldera earthquake.
Caldera.
Can't think of it right now, but Caldera. Thank you. The Caldera.
You know, I mean, there's some members of Congress who are making a big deal about passing a new bill that would allow for these people creating these sanctuary cities and sanctuary counties to go to jail. But the law is already there. It's just not being enforced. It's called Title VIII. And that really is the big problem. We have a Congress that gets their face on TV saying we need a new bill to do X, Y, and Z, forgetting that such a bill already exists. It's just not being enforced.
Right.
And again, Trump did campaign on a promise of getting tough on illegal immigration. That did not happen. And you're absolutely right. The reason the Democrats are pulling in all these people is they can count on them to vote illegally Democratic in next year's and 2020's elections. And the more I think about the fact that Conyers and Franken have been basically taken out of political life, those were high-profile people. And I think the Democratic field, as you will, is being deliberately culled to get rid of potential competitors for the Democratic primary in 2020. I got to tell you, in all honesty, I think the reason it's going so strongly as it is, even though it makes the Democrats as a whole look bad, I think Hillary's people are trying to weed out any potential competitors to her. And that's exactly what Richard Nixon was doing during his run for re-election. They went on out and they basically destroyed all the Democrats that Richard Nixon thought could be a serious challenge to him until we got left with George McGovern. Okay.
Well, you could be right, Mike. You're probably absolutely right. Mike, you're right, but what about Joe Biden? Maybe he'll have right before the election, 2020, he'll have a heart attack or something. She's going to have to get rid of Biden.
I think he already said he's not going to run. I think he already said he's not going to run. So.
Well, okay, let's just hope this guy passes his bill with the sanctuary cities and arrest these guys. This guy, I believe it's Todd Roketa or something out of Indiana.
They're not going to enforce this new bill any more than they enforced the last one. And we are descending into a mobocracy the way that Rome did. Anyway, Tom, we've got to let you go. Thank you very much. We're going to let you go. Get on back to the news here because we're coming up to the top of the hour, and our third hour guests, Dave Gahary and Phil Turney, about the USS Liberty. So Japan is now getting ready for the possibility of an attack from North Korea. They're carrying out citywide evacuation tests. That's a major, major event if you look at some of those cities out there. And they're conducting similar drills in smaller cities as well. So they're getting ready. Now, Ron Paul has stepped forward, volunteering to be a peace envoy to North Korea for President Trump. The only problem being that Trump's administration, the war hawks, the neocons, they don't want peace. They need a major, major war on which to blame the rapidly declining U.S. economy. Because if there is no war, the economy continues on the way it's going. And I'm expecting after the Christmas rush is over and we start seeing major, major losses of retail stores and jobs, the American people are going to say, this is all the fault of Wall Street. This is all the fault of the Federal Reserve. It's all the fault of the Congress and the White House. And so one of the reasons to accelerate this war agenda and get something major going is so the government is going to be able to say, it's the war. We have to pay for the war. We're sorry, but, governing is choosing and governing is prioritizing. We're sorry that you people are going hungry and you're dying of easily cured illnesses because the Medicare payments have stopped, but we've got to go on out and give those evil people what for. It's all their fault that you're suffering. Don't blame us. We didn't do anything wrong. Now, we have been talking about the high cost, poor quality of America's weapons. I think those embarrassments over in South Korea illustrate that perfectly. F-22 lost power, got back to the airfield, had to be towed off. Pieces of the F-35 flying off while it's in flight. And this gets us back to one of the high-tech whiz-bang systems that the Navy has been developing. They've spent $500 million developing an electromagnetic rail gun, and it looked really impressive, and they developed a special projectile to go with it called a hypervelocity projectile. It was basically lighter in weight, so it could be accelerated much more rapidly. And somebody did some calculations and found out that using that same projectile that's lighter in weight, they could get the same velocities and range using conventional artillery. And so now there's talk of just canceling this entire project. And there's also the issue that the cycling rate, at least on the current test bed railgun, is nowhere near as rapid as that of naval artillery. So, getting into the economic news here, the dollar has suffered the worst year since 2003. And it's not looking like it's going to reverse course anytime soon. And apparently the word coming out of Washington via Bloomberg is that tax reform isn't about to save the dollar, where federal rate hikes have failed. One of the reasons the dollar is in trouble, along with the fact that it's being hyperinflated, is if other countries take in a dollar and they bring it back to the United States, what can they buy with it? Our manufactured goods are overpriced junk. Nobody wants those. Nobody wants our GMO agriculture. The dollar's real worth is not what it prices against gold or other currencies, but what you can actually trade it for. And if there's really nothing out there that you want to trade that dollar for, then the real value of that dollar is pretty much zero. And that's why so many of these other countries are turning to the ruble and the yuan and these other basket currencies, so forth and so on. Paul Craig Roberts has come up with a new name, a new phrase for what's going on in this country right now, and he calls it plunder capitalism. And basically he opposed the tax cut for the large corporations that passed Congress because it's got nothing to do with supply-side economics. The only purpose was to raise equity prices by providing equity owners with more capital gains and dividends. In other words, it's there to drive that stock market up so the government can use it as a propaganda banner. How can you say the economy's in trouble? Look, the Dow is pushing 45 million. I mean, that tells you how good our economy is, even as we have 100 million Americans chronically out of work. Now, there was an article over in Giza Death Star talking about the missing $21 trillion. And ever since Donald Rumsfeld had to take the podium at the Pentagon and admit that the Pentagon had misplaced $3 trillion, more and more people are trying to look and find out where's the money going. And the latest estimated number is that the U.S. government as a whole, including the Pentagon, have managed to misplace $21 trillion of your money. Nobody seems to know where it went, or nobody seems to want to say where it went. So apparently there's an economist over at the Michigan State University who says that despite his best efforts to find out where it went, all he's getting is obfuscation, buck passing, and missing links. And now the story has captured the attention of Greg Hunter, who's the financial commentator at USAWatchdog.com. And that's a legitimate question, because that wasn't the government's money they lost, that was your money. And just think of how much good $21 trillion could do to this country for its infrastructure, for its education. Maybe it's not missing. Maybe it simply got spent on unreported research and development for new weapons, the wonder weapons. But that's a lot of money to just have go walkabout. And if nothing else, it proves that the U.S. government is a bad manager. They can't manage themselves. Why should we let them manage us? Which makes a lot of common sense to me. Bloomberg's Matt Townsend is saying that America's retail apocalypse is only just now getting started, echoing my sentiment about what we're likely to see at the end of the holiday shopping season. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, China's central bank is warning Bitcoin will die. And we know that China has cracked down on the Bitcoin exchanges over there. And again, this may be concern that as a virtual currency, it can be manipulated wildly out of control, which seems to be what's going on right now. And of course, any central bank, they want their currency to be the currency everybody is using because they make money off of that. If people are using Bitcoin or Ether or any other cryptocurrency, the bankers aren't making a piece of the action off of that until they can take control of it and say, well, we're now loaning Bitcoins into circulation at interest, which is the essential scam of private central banking. So China is out there saying it's going to die. Bitcoin's value is continuing to climb. I did go ahead and take the recommendation of the caller the other day, and I did set up a Bitcoin link at whatreallyhappened.com, and so far we've raised 0.000004 Bitcoin. So we're off and running on our way to incredible wealth beyond the dreams of Midas. Looking over at the stock market, there is a growing concern that a car crash is coming, and it will be led by Tesla. And the reality for all the automakers is people just don't have the money to buy new cars. The conventional business model, planned obsolescence, was that a low-end car was designed to last just 5 years, and the luxury models for 8. The thinking was the original owner would keep it for 5, and then it would go into the pre-owned vehicle market. Used to call them used cars, now it's pre-owned. But people are keeping their cars much longer. We've kept this Honda for 18 years. We don't want to take out a car loan because we are not sure we can pay it. And that is a very common sentiment. So the car companies have been manufacturing cars. They're having to rent huge lots to keep the surplus. And again, if you look at the actual car commercials on the air right now, the deals are amazing. They can't move their product. And they're not going to be able to move their product, no matter how great their offers are, until we return to a system where the wealth accumulated at the top of our economic pyramid is recycled back down to the bottom in the form of decent wages and salaries that people can trade their labor and skills for, at which point they'll take that money and they'll go down to the car lot and they'll buy a new car, or they'll go to the shopping mall and they'll buy a new TV, or they'll pay down their credit card bills, or they'll buy a new home. But we have an entire economy that is just focused on finding ways to get more and more money out of the general population. But you can't take out what isn't in there in the first place. Okay, we got to do a station break here. When we come on back, we're going to have Dave Gahary and Phil Turney of Erasing the Liberty. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. And joining us for this hour is Phil Turney and Dave Gahary talking about their book, Erasing the Liberty, which it says right on the front, My Battle to Keep Alive the Memory of Israel's Attack on the USS Liberty. So, Phil and Dave, thank you for spending time with us today. Are you there?
Mike. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Mike.
Phil, obviously you're the author of this book, and why don't you tell us briefly what it's about, and more importantly, why you felt you needed to write this?
how long it took to write it?
No, why you wanted to write it.
Well, I wanted to write it to get the truth out, Mike. And without Dave, I couldn't have done it. He put himself, all in on this, and it was just, very extraordinary. What a book! What a book! And we had a huge article in the New York Times last week, and I'm sure Dave can talk about that.
Yeah, Dave, would you tell us about that? I know you had an article and also an ad.
Yeah, it was just an ad. It was a full-page, full-color ad in the New York Times book review, the holiday book review section, which is the largest book review section of the year, 60 pages. It comes out every Sunday, this book review section. I don't buy the New York Times. I see some of the articles online. That's not why we took it out in the New York Times. We were approached by someone, a patriot, who read the book and was very moved by the book, and he wants to allocate some funds, an awful lot of funds, to promoting the book and the movie project, the film project, and the USS Liberty in general, because it's something that, as a lot of people feel the same way, it's something that really bothers him, and it's bothered him for a long time, and it bothers him that they're able to cover it up so deeply. So we, him and I and Phil, went over what we could do, and we settled on this particular ad that you see, Mike, and it's a powerful ad. It was on page 21 of the insert of the section, the book review section, and people from all over the world have been ordering the book, and we actually had an order today from one of the hosts at Fox News.
Oh, that's a big one right there. Now, I've read the book, and it is very moving, and I'm about to hand my copy of it to somebody I think you both know, Jim Beardsley.
Oh, yeah, Jim's a great guy.
Of course.
Yes, he is.
We love Jim.
He's actually out here in Hawaii visiting with us, and he was going to try and get back to the studio here so he could say hi to you, but I'm going to say hi to you on his behalf. Looking at what it costs to run an ad in the New York Times, your, I presume, anonymous supporter is being very generous. That's a lot of money to get that ad out there.
The ad is, the cost of an ad is public information. Prior to any discounts that one can receive, I imagine if they would ask for them, which I asked, the ad would go for around, I think it was $33,000, whereas a full-page ad, full-page, full-color ad in the New York Times Daily, not the Sunday, is about $72,000.
Well, it's obviously had the impact if you're getting all these orders. I'm glad people are buying this book. This is a book that people do need to read, and I'm sure most of our listeners are already very well aware of Israel's duplicity in attacking the USS Liberty and trying to blame Egypt for it, and then when that all failed, trying to claim it was all an innocent mistake, the weather was terrible, our pilots can't see, and there have been so much information that's come forward that totally undermines the official story. And then we hear about the bordering on treasonous behavior of President Lyndon Johnson, who literally said he would rather see that ship full of American sailors on the floor of the ocean than to embarrass our friend in Israel. So Donald Trump's caving into Israel again today by recognizing Jerusalem as their capital. He's continuing a long and proud tradition of American presidents of just bowing and scraping before Israel. So, Phil, you're the actual survivor, and would you like to share some of what you recall of that incident with our listeners?
Yeah, thanks, Mike, and thanks again for having my dear friend Dave on, and myself, and of course, you're a strong supporter of the USS Liberty and a friend, and God bless you for that. Thanks for having us on.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. The attack was brutal. It lasted about as long as the attack on Pearl Harbor. 2/3 of the crew was either dead or wounded out of a crew of 294. There were over 208 Purple Hearts, many bronze, well, not many, about 20 bronze, 18 bronze stars, and maybe 10 silver stars, and the rest Purple Hearts and Navy Cross and stuff like that. So you could tell that, it was really, really bad. Over 850 cannon rocket holes, 5,000 over 5,000 armor-piercing bullets in our ship. Napalm dropped on our ship, which is a war crime against the Geneva Conventions, which didn't mean crap to Israel. And then we got a 40 by 40 foot hole in our starboard side by one of 3 torpedo boats that fired 5 torpedoes at us and continued to fire on us, continuously slaughtering innocent Americans, our firefighters and stretcher bearers, trying to murder us all. And of course, if we go to the bottom, you know who they're going to blame it on. They're going to blame it on an Arab state. And in this new book, Mike, and I call it new because it's the final edition. I mean, we can always add things to it, but this book is so complete and so detailed, thanks to Dave's tenacity and not giving up on the exact truth, is incredible. You got to read this new book. There's a lot of new stuff in it, and it's. I'll tell you, folks, go to USSLibertyMovie.com and find out how to get it, or go to erasingtheliberty.com, erasingtheliberty.com. Either of those one sites will get you to the book. But Mike, this attack was not only on just our ship. It was an attack on the United States Navy and America, all Americans. And you're right. Today will live in infamy as far as I'm concerned. It makes me want to puke to think that Donald Trump got on his knees to Benjamin Netanyahu and licked these boots and made Israel the capital. Now that's going to cause more problems than we ever wanted or needed in this country, like we don't have enough already.
Absolutely on that one. Now, a couple of points I want to make. Along with all the other medals that were awarded to the crew of the Liberty, Captain McGonigal was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. And what was very interesting about that is it was the only Congressional Medal of Honor not awarded at the White House by the President personally. Instead, the ceremony was held at the Navy Yard, where the public and press could be kept on out. And it was like they were trying to do the right thing by the crew, but they were trying to basically keep it hidden from the public. And you have to look at the way our history of naval events seems to be kind of skewed, because remember the USS Monitor from the Civil War. That was lost during a storm due to non-seaworthy design, but it's honored and remembered. The USS Maine was destroyed by a magazine fire, honored and remembered. USS Arizona lost to Japanese attack, honored and remembered. And, of course, tomorrow's Pearl Harbor Day. The USS Indianapolis lost to a Japanese attack, crew eaten by sharks, honored and remembered. USS Thresher destroyed by a welding failure, honored and remembered. USS Scorpion destroyed by a faulty torpedo battery, honored and remembered. Then you have the USS Liberty, which successfully repelled a sneak attack by Israel, and she was scrapped and forgotten.
Absolutely, Mike. And I might add, when Captain McGonigal got his award at the Navy Yard from a low-level admiral, on his citation, his Medal of Honor citation, it does not mention the attackers. It is nowhere to be found. It is like the ghost did it. Same thing on my Bronze Star with a V. It does not mention who attacked us. And that is just incredible. You know, I've petitioned the Navy, the State Department, CIA, the FBI, everybody that I could think of to have one word inserted into my citation, and that's Israel. And they all refused, said it's not going to be changed. It will never be changed. There's only one medal that I know of from a person that got it, and he's deceased now. He got it about 40 years after the attack, the Silver Star, and it does mention Israel. That's the only citation that I know of that mentions the Zionist state of Israel doing the murderous, callous massacre aboard USS Liberty. Massacre is a very kind word for what they did to Americans, the Navy, and sailors aboard that ship on the high seas, Mike.
Well, I remember there was an incident where Captain McGonigal actually tried to give the order to abandon ship, but when they put the lifeboats into the water, the Israelis machine-gunned him.
That's absolutely true. We had enough life rafts for 294 souls. There were only 3 life rafts left. In fact, I took one of them over myself. It floated on the starboard side, on the port side to the aft of the ship. I don't know if it was sunk or one of them taken aboard their torpedo boats, but they did take one aboard their torpedo boat as a trophy of their murderous, callous kill of Americans, as a trophy for the massacre aboard the USS Liberty, which is unconscionable, destructful, and I just even hate to think about these people honoring these murderers that killed my shipmates and tried to murder me. And I'll never forget or forgive them. The truth will come out, and thank God for erasing the Liberty, because this book is going to make a lot of waves, and it's doing it already. Even with the early limited edition, it's been a huge success. And with this new ad we got, and thanks to our donor, new things are going to happen, along with, as Dave said, this person from another network, I think he said Fox, wants the book. So, yeah, we're making a lot of waves, thank God.
Well you should, because it was treacherous of Israel. And, of course, when enemy forces are abandoning a naval ship, it's against the law of the sea, various treaties, to machine gun the life rafts that they're trying to get away in. And for Israel to have actually done that tells us that Israel intended to not have any survivors, to contradict the story by which they were going to try and frame Egypt for this whole mess.
Absolutely, and we had no clue, Mike, who was attacking us, because they used unmarked jet aircraft, which is another war crime. We didn't know who was attacking you. We thought it was an Arab state. We didn't know who was attacking us until the torpedo boats got close enough. We could see the Star of David, and our thoughts were, oh, thank goodness our great friends, the Israelis, are here to help us, because, you know, they reconned the ship over and over and over that morning, and told everybody, yeah, it's a U.S. ship, USS Liberty. They looked it up, James Fighting Book, identified it as a intelligence gathering ship. They had us on their war table, and when they changed the watch, they said they forgot we were there and took us off their war table. So this was a pre-planned attack to murder us all and blame it on an Arab state, and they almost got by with it. They just almost got by with it. With sending commandos right after the torpedo boats left in helicopters to finish us off, but for some reason they left, because I think the gig was up. They knew that Israel did it, and it was too late for them then. It was just too late.
Well, it looks to me like the plan originally was they were going to use the unmarked aircraft to sink the ship, but when they weren't able to, that's when they went ahead and sent the torpedo boats, and then when that failed is when they sent the commandos and the helicopters. But at that point, the jig was up. Word was getting on out that it was Israel attacking the USS Liberty, and that was due in part to a very heroic radio operator who managed to improvise a new antenna after Israel had shot away the communications gear on the bridge of the ship.
Correct. That was Terry Aldervardier, the gentleman I was telling you about that got the Silver Star for his gallantry hooking up a antenna that was not in service at the time, so it wasn't generating any heat or transmission, so they missed it. And the thing of it is, the terrible thing of it is our government recalling, McNamara recalling, and Johnson recalling the aircraft to come to our aid. And one of the fellows who was on the USS America just passed away, Mr. Sokol, and he has one of the helmets that that one of the pilots threw on the deck. He was so irritated he couldn't come help us, and he's got that helmet, and that's going to be in Dave's possession shortly. So we've got a lot of memorabilia from that attack, and I also have a rocket hole that I cut out. It will someday end up in a museum. It was given to me on loan by Larry Thorne, but I think he wouldn't mind if it goes into a museum when we're all dead and gone. Hopefully we can get this story out, break Israel's back. I mean, literally break their back once American people find out the real truth about their supposed ally, Israel. They're nobody's ally. All they care about is Israel. Israel first, Israel always, and Israel only, period. That's just the way it is. And by the way, they got Marines in Israel on standby in case there's any disturbance. What the hell have we got Marines in Israel for when the IDF there is to protect their own country is beyond me. I just heard this last night.
That does sound very strange. But getting on back to Israel's behavior, I think the timing of your book and hopefully the movie is very good, because after the lie about Saddam's nuclear weapons fell apart, the American people are coming to understand that we are lied into various wars. We're tricked into various wars. And one of the tricks used, of course, is a false flag attack, which is exactly what Israel carried out against the USS Liberty. We actually have another survivor on the phone, Ron Kukal. Ron, are you there?
Yeah, Ron was, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to take a quick moment, if I might, to congratulate both Dave and Phil for the New York Times article. I'm looking at it right now. Kudos, congratulations, and thank you for being the patriotic Americans they are.
Much appreciated, Ron. Thank you.
Yeah, nice. I don't want to take up any more. Yeah, I don't want to take up any more time. I'll listen, but I'll get off here and listen on my computer. Anyway, I just wanted to put that 2 cents worth in. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much for that. Now, we're going to have to take a break for a commercial here. When we come on back, I want to go in deeper to this idea that the carrier, America, launched rescue protection missions that were recalled by direct presidential order. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Dave Gahary and Phil Turney about their book and potential movie project, Erasing the Liberty. It's about the long cover-up of Israel's deliberate attack on the USS Liberty, an attempt to sink the ship and frame Egypt for it to trick the United States into war on Israel's side. And it's not the first time Israel has done this. Israel has faked attacks on Americans and then pointed the finger of blame elsewhere to send the U.S. war machine off against Israel's enemies. So this was just part of a continuing, ongoing pattern. What is really probably very hard for Americans to deal with is the fact that after that radio man heroically got that antenna running and they were able to get out a message saying they were under attack by Israel, a nearby U.S. aircraft carrier, the America, launched a mission of a squadron of planes. I don't know how many planes were there, but they launched a series of planes to try and get over the USS Liberty and prevent any other Israeli forces from getting close. And Phil, I'll let you take the story from here.
Okay, thanks, Mike. I will, and I will. There's just a little correction here. Actually, the first volley of jets came off the USS Saratoga. Captain Joseph Tully, a World War fighter pilot, ace fighter pilot, sent the first volley off. They recalled him for the hit the horizon. He sent another volley of aircraft off right after they landed their other planes, and they were recalled directly by Johnson. McNamara recalled the other ones. Now, I do know that America did launch aircraft. Dave might have a better idea of this than this, because he's talked to a lot of different people on the America, but I knew they were doing missions, and they had aircraft in the air, and it's been widely spread that we were within minutes of a nuclear war, possibly with the Russians, because these airplanes had nuclear weapons on them. Now, as I said before, Dave, you might want to ask Dave about this too, because he's an expert on this. Even though I was there, Dave's done so much research, and I'll hand it off to Dave. But first, I want to say to Ron Kugel that Ron Kugel was in charge of body recovery and identification. He was a senior enlisted man tasked with that grim task when we got involved. Dave, do you want to go ahead?
Dave,
yeah, sure, Phil. Yep. Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Yes. Well, the story, you would think after 50 years that all the facts of the massacre aboard the Liberty would be out there, but they're not, believe it or not. And when Phil was talking about the edition that's coming out now, of course, Mike, you have the limited edition print run, and
yes,
that was without an ISBN number. Now we have a book that's available that has an ISBN, and it has upgraded information in there, because once this book came out, the first edition or the limited edition print run, once that came out, people came forward who were on the Liberty or who were in the military and had other information, so we added that in there. And one of the fellows who came forward was on the USS Saratoga that Phil had just mentioned. That was the first U.S. Navy ship that picked up the SOS from the Liberty. And the way that it was picked up is fascinating. So it's not just like the Liberty got the message off and then Saratoga picked it up and they could hear exactly what the Liberty was saying. No. The fact is, and folks can read this if they go to really the best website address, and Phil mentioned both of them to go to, is erasingtheliberty.com, because there you can get the book. If you want to know about the movie, there's a tab on that website that says the movie, and of course you can make donations to the movie, which a lot of folks who have been brought over to the website by the ad in the New York Times are doing both. They're actually buying the book on erasingtheliberty.com and then clicking the tab up top of the movie and making a donation to the movie, because I think they realize how significant this story being told to a large audience would be. But what happened was that because the Israelis were jamming all of the frequencies of the Liberty, including the distress frequencies, which again is an act of war, and it's a war crime. And it
proves that Israel knew they were dealing with an American ship.
That's right. That's right, exactly. So, I mean, the evidence is there's just too much evidence to even waste time on them saying that it was an accident, it was a case of mistaken identity. We're way beyond that. but
yes, we are.
Not us.
Dave,
but I just
unfortunately, our commercial breaks are spaced kind of irregularly. Sure. We're going to take another commercial break, and then we're going to have a big chunk of time for you to tell us this story. And I think everybody's probably looking forward to this. I'm already getting email from people coming on in who are responding to this. We'll be right back. Aloha America, welcome back to the show. We're talking with Dave Gahary and Phil Turney about their book and possible movie, Erasing the Liberty. So, Dave, we've got a big chunk of time ahead of us right now, and I want to go into the story about how the radio man on the Liberty reattached the antenna. They got a signal out. They were being jammed on the U.S. Navy military frequencies by Israel, which proves they knew it was a U.S. ship. How did the signal get out there, and how did U.S. naval forces in the immediate region respond?
Okay, great. Now, first of all, let me just say, Mike, and it's not in the limited edition print run, but it's in the upgraded book. There is some disagreement among crew members about whether or not this fella, Terry Halbardier, who was I think an ET, an electronics technician, that whether or not this actually happened the way that some of them have claimed that it happened. And the reason is because there were no witnesses to this, not one. And the information came out over 40 years after the massacre. So I want to say that, number one.
Okay.
Number two is that the radio man who was sending out a distress signal, I think his name was Hellman. I'm pretty sure it was, and he was saying actually the same thing over and over again. That any station, this net, and Phil has said this so many times, I'll say it here since I'm talking, this is Rockstar. We are under attack. Any station, this net, this is Rockstar. We are under attack. And, of course, Rockstar was the call sign for the Liberty. Well, what happened was because Israel, as you said, Mike, already knew who they were attacking because they had the frequencies for the Liberty, and they were jamming them on purpose to sink it. Since they knew that, there was the way that an SOS would be sent out normally wasn't in that fashion. It would be done by teletype machine. So they couldn't do that because they were knocked out. So they were using a very rudimentary circuit, the voice circuit, which nobody really uses. Or nobody really used at that time, and of course they don't do it nowadays. And this young 20-year-old sailor aboard the USS America, or the USS Saratoga, I'm sorry, and he was on board there. He got stationed to the they called it the Sarah. He got stationed to the Sarah in October of '66. This, of course, was June 8th, 1967. He was just a 20-year-old E3. Really just, as he called himself, a lowly seaman. He was on his watch, and he was monitoring this voice circuit, which they only listened to like once an hour because there was nothing on there. There was never anything on there. Well, what happened was, and this is such a fascinating story because if it wasn't for this one lowly, which he called himself, which he's certainly not, he's a hero, one lowly sailor who actually, before he came into the Navy, was a radio nut.
Yes.
His house was filled with antennae, and he loved shortwave radio. So he had his ears trained to listen, and what he heard was static. And that would be static to everybody else, but he sensed a pattern in there. And he asked his superior, one of the crypto guys, actually, he said, could you come over? And he said, listen, what do you think of this? And the crypto guy said, it just sounds like static. And as John told me, he more or less kept on walking. And John said, I don't believe this. So he went over to the receiver, and he sort of fine-tuned it a little bit, and he actually heard it. He said it was garbled. It was garbled because they were off just the frequency, which he fine-tuned. That wasn't a problem, he said. But the problem that we had all along was that they were being jammed. there was a constant carrier, like somebody holding a microphone button down nearby.
Mm-hmm.
It distorted their voice a bit. And he said, but by the time I had tuned them in and actually found them, we could understand what they were saying without too much problem. Of course, they got John off of the gear there, and they sat down a more senior guy. But if it wasn't for John and his experience before coming into the Navy and being determined that he hears the static, but he thinks that it's something there, and by the good grace of God, that John happened to be on duty at that time to be listening to that voice circuit, we have the information because Sarah was the only ship that was picking up this signal, and probably because Sarah was the only one who still said, let's monitor this voice circuit. Nobody's going to be broadcasting anything, but let's monitor it anyway. So that's the story about how that SOS was received.
So what did Saratoga do at that point?
What happened was, after John was relieved by a senior radioman, and this is kind of another fascinating part to the story, was that it was time to contact the skipper. So they called up to Captain Tully, who Phil mentioned before, and told him that they had a distress call. Captain Tully insisted, and this is all new to literally everyone who knows anything about the Liberty, Captain Tully insisted that instead of sending up the message through the pneumatic tubes, like when we go to the drive-in at the bank.
Yes.
He insisted that somebody hand-deliver them to him. So one of the guys took the message and carried it all the way up to the bridge to Captain Tully, which John still doesn't understand why that happened, because his shop was all the way forward of the ship, and it took 10 minutes to run that message to the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd never seen Captain Tully do that with any other messages. They always used the bunny tube. So that delayed the SOS to the captain, but as soon as the captain got the message, then they launched aircraft. And Captain Tully, who was a great friend of Phil Turney and a great friend of the Liberty, actually put out a statement about launching the aircraft and how that happened, and it's in the book, and how they were recalled, and he never knew why they were recalled. All he knew is he got the distress call. A U.S. Navy ship was in need of aid. He launched his planes, and they were recalled. The America also launched planes, and they were recalled. And as far as I can tell, Mike, Johnson, his words, I know that it's been embellished a lot over the decades, but his words appear to be that, just get the ships back, or get the planes back. He's not going to embarrass his ally. And he was told this, or this was told to the world by Commander Dave Lewis, who was in charge of the cryptological department on board the Liberty. That was told to Dave Lewis by Admiral Geiss, who experienced it because he was the one who launched the planes, and he was in charge of the Carrier Task Force Group at that time. And he launched the planes, and then he was there when McNamara first recalled them, and then Johnson recalled them. And so Admiral Geiss, once Dave Lewis was brought aboard America from Liberty because he was one of the injured, he called him into his cabin, and he said, listen, you're the senior officer on board here from the Liberty. I have to tell you what happened, but you have to swear on your life that you will never repeat it until I'm dead. And Dave Lewis did keep that secret with him for 20 years until he was told at a reunion by another great man, Admiral Moorer, that Admiral Geiss had died, and that's when Dave Lewis told his story about Johnson recalling the planes. He didn't mention Israel. He just said, get the planes back. I will not embarrass my ally. And when Admiral Geiss put up a little fight, he said, you're neither big enough nor man enough to challenge me. I'll have you behind a desk.
Mm-hmm. So basically we had...
What's that?
I was going to say, basically what we had was an American president who was abandoning American military personnel to a watery grave, and then later on lied to the American people he's supposed to be working for, all to protect Israel.
Mike, you're exactly right. And every president since Johnson to President Trump have been under the thumb of Israel. And all of them are the same. I mean, they will not come out with the truth, but hopefully this book will do it. But my question is, and always has been for 50 years, is this. How did Johnson know who was attacking us? His ally, the only ally he had in that area was Israel. So that's automatic. I mean, that's a gimme. How did he know who was attacking us when USS Liberty did not send that message out until the torpedo boats came close to us and we saw them firing their torpedoes? It's the only time we knew that it was Israel. So he knew long before we did who was attacking us. Now, if that isn't a setup job, there's nothing in the world is. We were set up to die and go to the bottom, and America would have been yelling for blood, and they would have gotten oceans of blood because of the Arabs. It doesn't matter what state it was at that time. Any Arab country would have been in deep, deep trouble with America, and that's how close we come to World War III, as I said. So we're just very, very lucky that the other message got out that it was the Israelis. The Israelis are doing the attacking, and if that would have never gotten out, they would have continued it. But we've been done for. There's no doubt about it, because when they sent the commandos to come aboard our ship, they were armed to the teeth. I was 50 feet away from the helicopter, and it's in my book that I flipped them off, and they flipped me off. And the guy was smiling like I was his best friend, and the helicopter left. So yeah, duplicity from our government from day one, June 8, 1967 till now, continues in the Congress. Every president, and they will not tell the truth about what Israel did, no matter what Admiral Morris said, no matter what Lord Boston has said, who was the head counsel of the Board of Inquiry, and he's the top judge advocate. And I might also add, Mr. Starring, Admiral Starring, refused to sign off on the original Board of Inquiry because he says I hadn't had enough time to look at it. They took it away from him, and it was signed off within 6 or 7 days as mistaken identity, which was totally false. What I said to Admiral Kidd and what the other crew members have told the Admiral and people that have talked, it was all hushed up. We were never called in front of the inquiry, as I was hushed up at the State Department by Mr. Susser that run that venue there at the State Department. Would not let me speak when I was president of the LVA. He shut off all questioning because I was going to nail these guys, and they wouldn't give me the chance. And so that's just how powerful Israel is in this country and in this world to get by with what they get by with. Now, I don't know what's going to happen with this new deal in Israel with the capital being in Jerusalem and everything else, but all it does is put American lives and Westerners' lives in great jeopardy, and I think it's a total waste and a total mistake to do. But Netanyahu, once again, got a standing ovation, not only from the Congress, but now from President Trump and his relationship with Kushner, his son-in-law. So setups, we're still being set up by the very government that promises to protect all Americans by following the Constitution of the United States, which they're not doing and never have. That's just the way I feel about it, Mike.
Well, I agree with you wholeheartedly, and you need to remember it was that same President Lyndon Johnson who escalated the war in Vietnam based on a bogus sonar report that became the torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin. So these are how these things get done. Franklin Roosevelt willingly sacrificed the ships and the men here at Pearl Harbor to get the U.S. citizenry angry to go to war with Japan and, by extension, Nazi Germany. Now, we're almost out of time here. Real quick, Dave, I seem to recall someplace a report that there actually was a United States submarine in the immediate vicinity of the USS Liberty. It was submerged, but supposedly watching what was going on through the periscope. Have you got a confirmation or a denial of that?
Yeah, Mike, that's the story. There were two subs, a fast attack, the Amberjack, and a ballistic, the Samuel L. Jackson. But there's nothing definitive about it. There's also people who believe that it was a U.S. submarine that launched the torpedo that hit the Liberty, which of course wasn't the case. The Israelis launched 5 of them, and sadly one of them hit. And that was the only torpedo that Israel had ever launched from their boats throughout the entire time they had them that actually hit a target. It had to be the Liberty. But no, there's nothing definitive about a U.S. submarine.
I just wanted to check. But at this point, it's very obvious that a very cruel joke has been played on the crew of the Liberty, on history, on the American people. Now, we're coming up on our last commercial break, and when we come on back, we're going to have about 4.5 minutes for you and Phil to say whatever you want to say to our listeners. So we'll be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, last segment of the program today, and we're wrapping up here with Dave Gahary and Phil Turney, who are the authors of Erasing the Liberty and a future movie deal for which I hope to be involved in the visual effects of. So we've got about 4 minutes left here. Dave, what do you want to share with our listeners?
Mike, thanks. And yes, you will be a big part of it. We have, since we talked about this on your show the last time, we've had a bunch more people in the movie industry, in the film industry, approach us and wanting to get this story out and not wanting anything from it, not wanting any money, just like Phil and I don't want anything for it. We feel very positive that it's going to happen. A lot of positive things have happened lately, which is really nice because, especially with all the horrible news surrounding us. So I would just encourage folks to go to erasingtheliberty.com to get the book, or go to usslibertymovie.com to donate to the movie. This can only be done by all of us. We don't have money. We're not rich. We need literally a little bit from everybody, and we'll get it done. And we'll get the story of the most decorated ship in the history of the United States Navy for a single engagement out there. Hollywood has never, they've had plenty of opportunity to tell Americans about this history that is hidden and has been hidden for 50 years. It's a national disgrace, and we can only do it with your help. Mike, thanks so much. I'm going to pass it over to Phil. Merry Christmas to you and yours and to your audience.
Okay, Phil?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And again, I want to thank you and RBN, John Stadtmiller. RBN has always been a staunch supporter of the USS Liberty, and I really think that radio station, RBN, stays on the air forever. I might add that at the very top of our new book, the new edition, is a quote from David Lewis, Commander David Lewis, who we talked about earlier, that almost lost his life in the torpedo explosion. And there's been, many books written about the USS Liberty. But in his view, now he was in charge of over 200 of the crew. because he was a spy, he was a spook, and he says one of the finest books he's ever seen. And for him to say something like that, folks, tells you a lot about what he knows and what he's read. He's read about erasing the liberty. And one of the reasons we call it erasing the liberty is the reason that they are trying to erase us from history, but we're not going to let them do it. So, folks, as Dave said, go to erasingtheliberty.com. Do your thing. Let's make this happen. And it's not just for us, folks. It's for America. We can change history, but we need your help. We can change history for the right, not for the wrong. God bless all of the men and women in uniform and the veterans and all of us. And they said, I wish everyone a Merry Christmas. And my very best, James Gursley, a good friend of mine, has been for years and years and years. He's giving my best regards, Mike.
I certainly will. We're expecting him back here any moment. He's going to be sorry that he missed you. There's our music. It's time to end our show. Please stay tuned for John Stedmiller. He's got a lot of interesting stuff to share with you. Please share what you learn here and at the website with everyone that you know. We know that the corporate media is trying to keep us all blindfolded. It's time for the people to work together to take the blindfold off. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.